So, have you ever had one of those weeks? Like one of those weeks where just everything goes wrong? Yeah, let me tell you about my week. Hey guys, welcome. My name is Felicia from SweetGeorgia, and this is Taking Back Friday. This is a space where we come every Friday and we talk about knitting and weaving and spinning and dyeing and all the things that I love about the fiber arts. Specifically, we talk about making time to make things. Now, if you have been sort of following along my Instagram account, my weaving Instagram account, it's called Low Meets Loom. For the past couple of days, I've been posting photos of this gorgeous blanket that I've been working on, and it was on this very loom. It's wonderful. It was wonderful to weave. It was wonderful to look at the colors, and I was posting all these photos, and I was very, very excited about it. And then, so first things first, this past week has been a little bit of a challenge. You know, both of my kids have been homesick from school, and so I've been home with them and trying to work in and around them, trying to do some filming in and around them, trying to do some computer work and all these kinds of things in and around them being home, which is, you know, great. We got to spend lots and lots of time together. We got to play in the attic and do all sorts of things like that. They play while I try to work in here on my weaving things and my school things. So all of that's been going on. And so that's a lot of the reason why I was able to take photos of this blanket that I was weaving on this loom. And everything was great until I think it was about Sunday night. You know, I started to not feel very well either. And I was like, just doing a million things like I do. So I'm making dinner and I'm decided to do laundry at the same time. And then decided to, I don't know, just like so many things going on. And then while the kids were having a little bit of downtime, I wove off the last few inches of this blanket. And so I had decided, oh, you know, I've been really good up until now. I've been doing, you know, mostly blues and purples and things to match with the warp that I had dyed specifically for this blanket. And then at the end, I was like, oh yeah, you know, one of my favorite colors is pink, hot pink. I love this sort of lollipop, vibrant fuchsia magenta kind of color. And I have this in my stash. Why not just add a little bit of pop of this particular color into the thing? So that's what I did. Wove off the blanket, did my hem stitching, and decided to cut it off the loom. That was all great. That was all wonderful. I decided I wanted to sort of preserve what I had of the dummy warp here, and so it was all still sort of sticking out of this reed here. I was going to preserve it. I was going to make something else with it afterwards, or I was at least going to think about what I was going to do with this dummy warp before doing anything else with it. So I cut the blanket off the loom, you know, unrolled the whole thing. I got this on video. I was all excited about this blanket, and I was really, really good because, you know, for the past couple of weeks, I've been recording a lot of videos for the Essential Weaving course on the School of SweetGeorgia. Basically, I'm recording a whole bunch of weaving videos. And as part of the weaving videos, I say it's really, really important to keep good records and to make notes of the things that you've done and to measure things on the loom, off the loom, before you wash them, after you wash them, all these things. So I was really good. I laid it out. I measured the whole blanket before and after, and I was making notes about how big this blanket was before washing. Now, I then, being in the midst of all these things, you know, making dinner, getting milk, doing stuff, I decided that I was going to put the blanket into the washer, which I have done in previous projects before. Yeah. So this blanket is actually made out of Harrisville Shetland, which is a non-superwash wool yarn. It's kind of a fingering sport weight kind of a yarn, and it's crossed with mohair and nylon yarn, brushed mohair, so it's very, very fuzzy. Now, I have in the past put my hand woven projects into the washer, but I'll stand there and I'll watch it like a hawk, and I'll just watch the washer and look at the timer and be checking all the time. And so I did this with the last blanket project that I wove, and I was like gloriously in love with this blanket. It was great. It turned out great. I'd folded it in the washer just the right amount. And so I thought I would do that for this project as well. So I put the blanket into the washer and turned it on and then just forgot about it. Like, I am really one of the most quite absent-minded when it comes to kitchen things and laundry things. Like, it's part of the reason why I think I've almost burned down the house a few times, how I almost burned down the studio a few times. I'm just, like, I've made these dyeing videos before for the School of Sweet Georgia, and one of the videos that I stress the most, one of the topics that I stress the most is about dye safety, and it's about, covering your, wearing a mask and making sure that everything is nice and clean and tidy. Like, I have all these rules and things like that that I have created about dyeing and dye safety. It's not really for other people. It's kind of designed for me. It's designed for the fact that I know that I'm kind of a messy dyer, that I know that I'm kind of absent-minded, that I know that I need a reminder to turn off the stove. And I needed a reminder to turn off the washer in this particular case. Normally I would have set a timer. I did not set a timer this time. And so when I was doing something else, I heard the sound of the washer going in the background, and I thought, what's in the washer? And then I went to go check, and then I was like, oh no. So the blanket did come out of the washer. It was very felted, and then I hung it up to dry, and it's dry now. Let me show you what the blanket looks like. Okay, so it doesn't look so bad on camera, but it's kind of bad in real life. So basically, this is the beginning of the blanket, and like, I know that this is all loom waste. This is all sort of the warp ends that were tied to the front of the loom. I'm going to cut these off. I would have done something with the fringe, but I just decided not to do anything with it. If I was happier with the blanket, I would have done something about this end of things. I would have cleaned this up. However, moving on, one of the very first things that you'll notice is that the fabric it's thick. It's felted. Like, the wool in the warp has completely felted, the mohair felted, everything shrunk significantly. Like, this is supposed to be the width of the loom. It was this big when it was this big when it was on the loom, and now it's this big. So that looks like it's about, I could measure it. It was originally about 43 inches, around there, 40 to 43 inches, and now it is 28 inches. It's shrunk quite significantly. So you can see it's shrunk quite a bit. You can see that the fabric is thick. It's really stiff. It's really, really hard. It's quite intense. Yeah. Now, the next thing that you might be able to see is that there are other sections that are not as shrunken. And you might be wondering why. Yeah. So this section is 37 inches wide. So it went from 43 inches to 28 inches to 37 inches. So what's going on there? So I think I'd mentioned before that I have actually two different weights of mohair in my attic here. I have some mohair that's considered sort of the 980 yards per pound. This is the brushed mohair. It's a very classic brushed mohair. And then I don't know where I got this yarn from, but I got another kind of mohair yarn that is pretty much half that weight. So it's like a even lacier lace weight version of the brushed mohair. So I have these two weights. Now, with this first part of the blanket, I was using the 980 yards per pound brushed mohair. This is the yarn that I used for my previous blanket, the one that's mohair crossed with mohair, and it turned out beautifully, and I gave it to my friend, and just all was good with that blanket. So that's what I used for this first part of the blanket. Then as I was weaving, as I do, I'm very prone to experimenting. And so I was like, well, I have all this lace weight yarn in here. What would happen if I just popped it in the blanket? Well, apparently this happens. So the lace weight version of the mohair doesn't felt or full as much as the previous stuff. And so this stuff felted to like just the right amount. Like it feels so good. So the lace weight mohair crossed with the Harrisville Shetland produces this fabric, which I love. However, it is not the same. It shrinks differently than the thicker mohair. And so you can see that this is not a good thing. Mixing yarns in the weft, not a good thing. I was just curious. And then I switched back again to the thicker mohair. So you can see there's some wrinkling here. It's kind of bubbling as this stripe is sort of bunching up and collecting because it's felting more than the other parts. And then I popped in some of this clementine because I had it. It was lying around. And then I thought, since I had the clementine in there, you know, as a shock of color, then why don't I pop that lollipop in there? So the lollipop is in there. This last bit is beach house. And yeah, so I love this part of it. These three last stripes, if the entire blanket was just like that kind of fabric, it would be perfect. It would be great. So this is my ugly experimental hand-woven mohair / Harrisville blanket. So a couple years ago, when we first started doing these vlogs, Leah, who works with me for the School of Sweet Georgia, she helps me edit the videos and things like that. She was suggesting that we should put together an episode about mistakes, about like bring out your ugliest mistakes, bring out all your mistakes and talk about them, because maybe, you know, somebody might find some encouragement in the fact that you make mistakes and that, you know, everybody makes mistakes. And so for like a long time, we didn't record this video. And it's not because I hadn't made mistakes. It's just because I hadn't made anything that I really wanted to share or talk about. But with this, I'm fired up to make changes now. So I think here's the thing. Mistakes happen, and we need mistakes in order to learn from them. Like, I'm recording all this weaving content and I can tell you what the right thing is to do. I can tell you how to do all these things. But at the end of the day, it's going to be you sitting at the loom, or it's going to be you sitting with your knitting. And I don't know if you're like me, but I'll get to a point where I'll be like, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? And if you don't give yourself the opportunity to go down those paths, to try it out, you won't know what's going to happen. I would never know. Well, I could have probably guessed, but I would never know really what would happen if I put this yarn in and then I put a different yarn in for weft, and I wouldn't know that this sort of effect would happen. So I think now I know that the next time I go and weave this blanket, there's a couple of changes that I want to make. Obviously, first one, set the timer when you pop the stuff into the washer to help it full. Normally with my hand-woven projects, I don't even put them in the washer. I normally hand wash them and let them soak and then agitate them a bit by hand, and then I hang them up to dry. But because the blanket is so big, rather than putting it in a bathtub and then mushing it around, I just decided to put it in the washer because that's easier. So next time I would either hand wash it or set a timer on the washer so that I can come back to it and remember to not let it sit there. The next thing is that I would probably be more disciplined about my weft usage and to make decisions at the very beginning of the project and not let the project go so long that I get bored halfway and think, what if we make these changes? What if we make these changes? If I'm going to make a project, I feel like it's really important I should stick to the specifications of the project. It's kind of like saying, you know, if you're knitting a shawl and halfway through you get bored of one yarn and you're like, what happens if I pop in this completely other yarn with completely different texture? You're going to get a completely different project. So that's number 2. The next thing is that when I first started this project, this was set up already at 6 ends per inch because that's what the loom was set up for. That's what I used for my previous weaving project. Now with this particular project, I had woven a small sample using the Purl and Loop swatchmaker loom. And I had woven that sample at 8 ends per inch. And I really, really liked the fabric. It made a nice balanced fabric. And then when I came to set up the loom, I was like, but it's already set up for 6 ends per inch. So I'll just do it at 6 ends per inch and then see what happens. So in doing so, I found that the first couple of stripes that I was weaving, they were more weft-faced than I wanted because all of the warp threads have been spread out a little bit wider, it gives more room for the weft yarn to pack down. And so the weft color was looking more prominent than I wanted. So that's something I would probably be more aware of next time, is to make sure that I weave to the specs of the swatch that I made. The other thing is that I had talked about how I dyed warp chains specifically for this project, but you can barely tell, that they're different, that there's stripes in the warp, right? A little bit. So you can see, there's a section. Yeah, there's a section here that's kind of this color, and there should be sort of 5 equal sort of stripes, but they're hard to see just because there's not enough contrast of value in these warp chains. There's just not enough contrast. So you can see the warps that I've dyed, they're purple, which is different from green, but if you squint and you close your eyes and you squint, these two colors are very, very similar in value. They almost look like they're the same. If you squint, they look like they're the same. So without that contrast of value in the warps, I'm seeing very, very little change in the coloring of the blanket. I'm seeing mostly weft colors. I'm not seeing the warp colors. So if I was going to make this blanket again, I would be more conscious about making those warps different, making those stripes more brightly contrasted. So as I was thinking about making another blanket, I was trying to preserve the warp on the loom and sort of preserve the dummy warp that was already there. And then somehow as I was jiggling the loom, all of the warp threads, I think when I cut off the fabric, I cut it off too close to the reed. So when I jiggled this for just a little bit, all of these warp threads fell out of the reed. So then I just pulled the whole thing out. And then some of the threads are still in the heddles, but probably a third of them have fallen out of the heddles because I was winding things and they all just slipped out the back. So now I am going to go through and, wow. So here is where I'm at a bit of a crossroads. I have these already that I still need to thread. So here's where I'm at a little bit of a crossroads. I have these heddles which are already set and ready to go. They are all threaded. They're in bundles of 8. All 8 shafts are being used right now, even though I'm just making plain weave. And then the remainder of these heddles just need to be threaded, and then the whole thing needs to be slayed. Now, I'm all fired up. I'm ready to wind more warps and then dye them and then put them back on here and make another blanket. And I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make changes to the warp coloring. I'm going to make changes to the weft coloring. I know that, I should go back to my personal comfort zone of the colors that I want to include in here. And I want to do more lollipop and I want to do more hot colors and orange and, just the colors that I'm really, really excited about. I want to put all those things in. However, I'm on a little bit of a deadline right now. So I have more weaving content that I want to be filming, and part of it is to use this loom for another project that I want to film with. And so part of me is thinking I could rush through and put together the materials that I need to make another blanket, or I could just abandon the dummy warp as it is, preserve what I have here, you know, reset it, you know, pull the whole thing out, put it into a rattle so that I can sort of set it up again, and then wind it onto the back beam so I can reuse this dummy warp for a whole other project for the school. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I feel like it would be slightly irresponsible of me to weave another blanket for myself right now. It's not like I need a blanket. It's not like I need this at all. I mean, it's something that I want to make. And I feel like I'm on the cusp of making a really good one this time and paying more attention. But at the same time, I feel like I have these other looms that I should use. Actually, you know what? I think it's going to be okay. I think I'm going to leave this loom with this setup so that I can make myself another blanket. And I'm pretty sure that I can find another loom in here. I think we might use that one. So thanks so much for spending a couple minutes with me today and listening to me talk about my blanket that went wrong. I just wanted to record this little message today because it just to serve as encouragement. You know, we all make mistakes. Mistakes happen, and if we don't make mistakes, then it gives us fewer opportunities to learn. So I would love to hear about your greatest mistake and what you learned from that mistake. You guys can leave a comment for me down below. If you like this episode, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, please do hit subscribe. I try to post every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I just come every week and we talk about knitting and weaving and spinning and dyeing and things to do with the fiber arts. If you want to find us at SweetGeorgia, you can find us on Instagram at SweetGeorgia. You can find me personally at Felicia Lo Wong, and you can see what I'm weaving at Lo Meets Loom on Instagram. Now, as always, you can find all of our hand-dyed yarn from SweetGeorgia at our website, SweetGeorgiaYarns.com, and you can see what I'm making for the School of SweetGeorgia at SchoolofSweetGeorgia.com. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye. Oh, look at all this bow hair.